The sun over Fairy Meadow Beach on January 12, 1970, wasn't just hot, it was heavy. It was the kind of Australian heat that sticks to your skin like a second layer of clothes, making every movement feel like you're wading through thick syrup. For the Grimmer family, this was supposed to be the reward. They were part of the 10 Pound Poms wave immigrants from the United Kingdom who traded the grey skies of Bristol for the promise of a golden life in New South Wales. Vince and Cheryl Grimmer had 4 kids, 4 energetic lives they were trying to build a future for. On this specific Monday, the sand was packed with hundreds of people. You couldn't turn around without bumping into a cooler or a colourful towel. It was the picture of safety. It was the middle of the day. But by 1:30 in the afternoon, the sky started to turn. In this part of Australia, they call it a southerly buster. 1 minute the air is dead still, and the next, a wall of cold wind and dust slams into the coast. It's a signal for every parent on the sand to pack up and run. Cheryl Grimmer told her children to head to the changing sheds to get out of the stinging sand. Ricky Grimmer was the oldest brother. He was only 7 years old, but in his mind, he was the protector. He led his 3 younger siblings, Stephen, Paul, and 3-year-old Cheryl, toward the brick shower block. The showers were crowded. It was a chaotic mess of wet kids, shouting parents, and slamming doors. Cheryl was being a typical 3-year-old. She didn't want to be in the wind. She was crying just a little bit, protesting the end of her beach day. Ricky did what any big brother would do. He told her to wait right there by the door of the girls' showers while he ran to find their mother, who was just a few yards away. He was gone for maybe 30 seconds, less time than it takes to tie a pair of shoes. When Ricky turned back around, the space against the brick wall was empty. The crying had stopped. The white sand was blowing across the concrete floor, but his little sister was gone. He looked behind the door. He looked in the stalls. He called her name over the roar of the wind, but the only response was the sound of the ocean hitting the shore. In that 30-second window, Cheryl Grimmer didn't just wander off. She vanished into thin air in front of hundreds of witnesses. This is the moment where the lives of the Grimmer family split in two. There is the life they had before that 30-second gap, and the nightmare they have lived in every single day since. For over 56 years, the question has haunted the Illawarra coast. How does a child disappear from a crowded beach without a single person seeing a struggle? Before we go any deeper into the strange leads and the dark secrets of the Balgownie migrant hostel, I want to check in with you. Where are you watching from today? And what's the weather like where you are right now? Are you under a clear sky, or is it a grey afternoon? Drop a comment below, it helps the channel more than you know. And if you're new to Crime Cortex, hit that subscribe button right now. We are dedicated to uncovering the truth behind the cases the world tried to forget, and you won't want to miss the massive updates coming out of the March 2026 review of this investigation. The silence that followed Cheryl's disappearance wasn't a quiet one. It was filled with the roar of the southerly buster wind and the frantic calling of her name. Cheryl Grimmer, a mother who had only been in Australia for a few months, felt that first cold spike of adrenaline. It's a feeling every parent knows, that brief second of panic when you lose sight of your child at the grocery store. But usually, that panic ends with a laugh and a hug. For Carol, the panic only grew. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the police were on the scene. Within an hour, the beach was no longer a place of leisure. It was a crime scene, though no one wanted to use that word yet. The 1970s were a different time. People didn't lock their doors in the Illawarra. You could leave your car windows down. The idea that a predator was lurking in the changing sheds of a family beach was unthinkable. The search was massive. We are talking about hundreds of volunteers, lifesavers, and police officers lining up arm to arm. They combed the sand dunes. They waded through the nearby lagoon. They checked every trash can and every parked car. As the sun began to set on January 12, 1970, the reality started to sink in. This wasn't a case of a toddler wandering into the waves. If Cheryl had drowned, her body would have likely been spotted in the shallow, clear water. No. Someone had stepped out of the shadows, snatched a 3-year-old girl in a sunsuit, and walked away. To understand why this hit the Grimmer family so hard, you have to look at where they were living. They were staying at the Balgownie migrant hostel. For those of you outside of Australia, these hostels were temporary housing for new arrivals. It was a melting pot of languages and cultures. People from all over Europe and the UK were packed into small, basic units, all trying to find their footing in a new land. The hostel was supposed to be a community, a safe harbor. But after Cheryl vanished, it became a place of suspicion. Neighbors looked at neighbors. Every man walking alone was a suspect. The police started interviewing the 10 Pound Poms and the other migrants, but there was a problem. In 1970, forensic science was in its infancy. There were no security cameras. There were no cell phone pings. There wasn't even a unified database to track known offenders across state lines. The police were relying on eyewitness accounts, and those accounts were a mess. One witness claimed to see a man in his 20s carrying a child wrapped in a towel. Another saw a blue car speeding away from the parking lot. A third person reported a teenager acting strangely near the showers. Every lead was a dead end. The Grimmer family was stuck in a loop of grief. Vince and Carol would sit by the phone, waiting for a ransom call that never came. They went on television, pleading for their daughter's return. Carol kept Cheryl's favorite toys exactly where she left them. She even kept a small pair of shoes by the door, just in case her little girl walked back through it. But the days turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. There is a specific kind of torture in a missing person case that doesn't exist in a murder case. It's the maybe. Maybe she was taken by a woman who couldn't have children. Maybe she's being raised in another city under a different name. Maybe she's happy. That hope is a poison. It keeps the wound open for decades. Ricky Grimmer, the 7-year-old who had been told to watch his sister, carried the heaviest burden of all. In the 1970s, there was no counseling for kids who witnessed a trauma like this. You were just told to be brave and move on. But how do you move on when you feel like the entire world blames you for 30 seconds of lost time? Ricky would spend the next 50 years looking for his sister in every crowd. Every time he saw a woman with Cheryl's eyes, his heart would stop. By the end of 1970, the police files were gathering dust. The public had moved on to the next headline. The Grimmers were left alone in a country that felt less like a paradise and more like a prison. What time is it there as you're listening to this? Does the sun feel bright where you are, or are you in the middle of the night thinking about the darkness of this story? If you're finding this deep dive compelling, please hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories like Cheryl's still matter, even 56 years later. We need to keep the pressure on so that cold cases like this get the resources they deserve. Now, as we move into the next section, we're going to look at the massive breakthrough that happened decades later. A secret confession that was hidden in a police file for 46 years. A man who claimed he did it, only for the entire legal system to collapse at the finish line. This is where the story gets complicated. This is where we see how the law can sometimes stand in the way of the truth. For decades, the case of Cheryl Grimmer was a ghost story told in the Illawarra. It was a warning to children. Don't go to the showers alone. But behind the scenes, in the dusty archives of the New South Wales Police, a document was hiding. It was a transcript from 1971, just 18 months after Cheryl vanished. In that year, a 16-year-old boy, a teenager who lived at the same migrant hostel as the Grimmers, had walked into a police station. He didn't just walk in, he confessed. He told the officers details that only the kidnapper should have known. He spoke about the wind that day. He spoke about the towel. He spoke about where he had taken the little girl. But here is the part that will make your blood boil. The police let him go. Because he was a minor, and because there was no physical evidence, no body, no weapon. The authorities at the time decided his confession was just the ramblings of a troubled kid. They patted him on the head and sent him home. That teenager grew up. He moved across the country. He started a life. He had a family of his own. All while the Grimmer family spent every Christmas staring at an empty chair at the dinner table. Fast forward to 2016. A new generation of detectives, part of Strikeforce South-esque, decided to digitize the old paper files. They stumbled upon the 1971 interview. They couldn't believe what they were reading. The details were too specific to be a guess. They tracked the man down now, in his early 60s, living in Victoria. They arrested him in 2017 and charged him with the murder of Cheryl Grimmer. For the Grimmer brothers, Ricky, Stephen, and Paul, this was the miracle they had prayed for. Their parents were gone, but finally, they were going to get justice. They were going to look the man in the eye who had stolen their sister. The trial was set for 2019. The man, protected by the court name Mercury, because he was a minor at the time of the alleged crime, sat in the dock. The prosecution's entire case rested on that 1971 confession. It was the smoking gun. But then, the legal system did something that many see as a betrayal. The defense lawyers argued that back in 1971, the police hadn't followed the rules. The teenager had been interviewed without a parent present. He didn't have a lawyer. He was vulnerable. Under modern Australian law, a confession obtained like that is considered tainted. It doesn't matter if it's true, it only matters if it was legal. The judge had a choice to make, and in a move that shocked the nation, the NSW Supreme Court ruled the confession inadmissible. Without that transcript, the prosecution had nothing, no body, no DNA. No witnesses who could identify a 60-year-old man as a 16-year-old boy from 50 years ago. The charges were dropped. Mercury walked out of the back door of the court, a free man. I want you to picture Ricky Grimmer in that moment. He had spent his entire adult life carrying the guilt of that beach day. He had finally reached the finish line, only to have the tape moved at the last second. He stood on the sidewalk outside the court, surrounded by cameras, and he broke down. He didn't just cry, he grieved all over again. The system had protected the rights of the accused, but it had completely forgotten the rights of the 3-year-old girl who never got to grow up. This is the point where most stories end. A cold case that got hot, then went ice cold again. But 2026 has changed everything. Before we get into the explosive March 2026 breakthrough, I have a question for you. What time is it there as you're hearing this? And honestly, after hearing about that court ruling, do you believe the judge made the right call to protect legal rights, or was it a failure of justice? I really want to see your thoughts in the comments. Also, if you're finding this story as gripping as I am, please share this video. When we share these stories, we keep the names of the victims in the public eye. We make it harder for the world to look away. Hit that share button right now. Coming up next, we are going to look at the new hope rising from the United Kingdom, a relative who refused to let the fire die out, and the brand new evidence that has the New South Wales government reopening the books this month. For a long time, it felt like the story of Cheryl Grimmer was trapped in a loop, a tragedy in 1970, a failed confession in 1971, and a legal collapse in 2019. But as we enter March 2026, the air in New South Wales feels different. There is a sense of momentum that we haven't seen in over 50 years. This isn't just about old police files anymore. It's about a global movement that started in the very place the Grimmer family called home before they moved to Australia, Bristol, England. In late 2025, the family's relatives in the United Kingdom reached a breaking point. They watched from across the ocean as the Australian legal system let the prime suspect walk free. They decided that if the courts wouldn't act, the public would. A massive advocacy campaign was launched, fueled by a UK-based relative who used social media to bridge the 10,000-mile gap. They started a petition that didn't just ask for justice. It demanded a specific, line-by-line review of how the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions handled the case. That petition exploded. It gathered over 100,000 signatures in record time. It caught the attention of powerful figures in the Australian Parliament, like Jeremy Buckingham, who did something truly radical in October 2025. He used what is called parliamentary privilege to stand up in the halls of government and say the name that the courts had tried to keep secret. He named Mercury. He read the confession out loud, word for word into the public record. He did this because the Grimmer family had given the suspect an ultimatum. Come forward and talk to us by midnight, or we reveal who you are. The suspect stayed silent. So, the shield was stripped away. Now, as of February 16, 2026, we have the biggest update in years. The New South Wales Director of Public Prosecutions, Sally Dowling, officially agreed to a high-level review of the decision to drop the charges. This is happening under the Victims' Right of Review policy. It means the government is finally admitting that the family's voice matters as much as the defendant's rights. But the 2026 breakthrough isn't just happening in courtrooms, it's happening in the dirt. Detectives and forensic teams have returned to a specific stretch of land in Wollongong, not far from where the old Balgownie migrant hostel once stood. They aren't just using shovels and brushes this time. They are using LiDAR light detection and ranging. This is the same technology used to find lost Mayan cities under the jungle canopy. It uses laser pulses to create a three-dimensional map of the ground, seeing through thick vegetation and detecting tiny anomalies in the soil that have been there for 56 years. They are looking for the cattle guard and the tubular gate mentioned in the 1971 confession details that the police originally thought were lies because they couldn't find them at the time. With 2026 technology, they are realizing that the landscape has shifted, and what was invisible in the 70s might be buried just a few feet under the surface today. There is a new energy in this investigation. In late 2025, volunteer searchers even brought in cadaver dogs to a new area of interest. One of the dogs reportedly began licking a tree, a specific behavior that handlers say indicates a deep, historical scent of human remains. It was enough to trigger a wide-scale forensic sweep that is continuing into this month. The Grimmer brothers, led by Ricky, are calling this their last stand. They are no longer waiting for the police to call them. They are driving the narrative. They even went out themselves to collect soil samples to send to independent labs in the UK and the United States. They are bypassing the bureaucracy because they know that every day that passes is a day the truth moves further into the shadows. This March 2026 review is more than a legal checkbox. It represents a shift in how we treat cold cases. It's a message to every person holding a secret from the 1970s. The world is still watching, the technology is catching up, and the family isn't going anywhere. What's the weather like today where you are? As you think about the detectives out there in the heat of the Illawarra, scanning the ground for a little girl's remains, does it make you feel like justice is finally possible? Or do you think 56 years is just too long for a crime scene to hold its secrets? If you want to see the footage of the LiDAR scans and the maps of the new search area, make sure you're subscribed to Crime Cortex. And if you believe the Grimmer family deserves the truth after 5 decades of silence, hit that like button right now. We are following this March 2026 review every single day, and we will bring you the results as soon as they break. Share this video. Someone out there might remember a blue car, a strange neighbor, or a conversation from the 1970s that didn't make sense at the time. Your share could be the one that brings Cheryl home. If you want to understand the true cost of this mystery, you have to look past the police tape and the court transcripts. You have to look at Ricky Grimmer. In 1970, he was a 7-year-old boy in a pair of swim trunks, squinting against the Australian sun. In 2026, he is a man who has spent over 5 decades living in the shadow of a 30-second mistake. Imagine being 7 years old and being told by your mother to watch your siblings. It is a small responsibility, a rite of passage for an older brother. But for Ricky, that responsibility became a life sentence. When he turned his back to find his mother, he wasn't being careless. He was being a child. Yet, the moment he realized Cheryl was gone, the child part of his life ended forever. For 56 years, Ricky has replayed those 30 seconds in his mind. He has wondered if he heard a car door slam over the wind. He has wondered if he saw a face in the crowd that he didn't recognize. He has lived with the what-ifs that would break a lesser person. What if he had stayed? What if he had held her hand tighter? What if he had just looked back 1 second sooner? In the 1970s, there was no vocabulary for survivor's guilt in the migrant hostels of Wollongong. You didn't talk about your feelings, you just kept going. Ricky watched his parents wither away from the inside out. He saw his mother, Carol, keep Cheryl's bedroom like a shrine, a frozen moment in time that never moved forward while the rest of the world aged. He saw his father, Vince, struggle with the silence of a house that should have been filled with a young girl's laughter. This is the hidden tragedy of true crime. We focus on the who and the how, but we often forget the who is left behind. The Grimmer brothers didn't just lose a sister, they lost the parents they were supposed to have. They grew up in a home where grief was the primary language. But here is where the story shifts in 2026. Ricky Grimmer is no longer the victim of his own memory. He has become the engine of this investigation. He is the one who stands on the beach every January 12, not to mourn, but to remind the world that he is still looking. He is the one who pushed for the UK advocacy. He is the one who stared down the cameras after the 2019 court collapse and promised that he wouldn't stop until he had an answer. Psychologically, this is a study in resilience. Ricky has turned his guilt into a weapon for justice. He has refused to let the Mercury suspect enjoy a quiet retirement. By forcing the March 2026 review, Ricky is finally taking back the power he felt he lost on that beach 56 years ago. He is no longer the 7-year-old boy who lost his sister. He is the man who is going to bring her home. The legacy of the Cheryl Grimmer case isn't just about a missing child. It's about the 10 Pound Poms who came to Australia with nothing but hope and were met with a nightmare. It's about a legal system that, for decades, prioritized the old-school way of doing things over the truth. And most of all, it's about the bond between siblings that even half a century and a vast ocean cannot break. What time is it there as you're listening to this? Does it feel like the middle of a long night or the start of a new day? Because for Ricky Grimmer, March 2026 feels like the first time the sun might actually break through the clouds. If you've ever felt like the system ignored you, or if you've ever carried a burden that wasn't yours to bear, hit that like button for Ricky. Let's show him that the Crime Cortex community is standing with the Grimmer family. Section 6. Final verdict and closure. Word count goal. 800 words. As we wrap up this deep dive into one of Australia's most haunting cold cases, we have to look at where we stand right now, in the final weeks of March 2026. The New South Wales government is under more pressure than it has been since the day Cheryl vanished. The combination of the UK petition, the LiDAR technology, and the raw, unfiltered courage of the Grimmer brothers has created a perfect storm. This review isn't just about looking at old papers, it's a test of the modern justice system. Can a crime from 1970 be solved with the tools of 2026? We are waiting on the results from the soil samples. We are waiting to see if the Director of Public Prosecutions will find a legal path to bypass the inadmissible ruling from 2019. There is talk of new legislation, a Cheryl's Law, that would allow historical confessions in child abduction cases to be heard by a jury, regardless of the technicalities of the era. But even if a trial never happens, something has changed. The silence has been broken. The name of the suspect is out there. The locations have been mapped. The world knows what happened in those 30 seconds at Fairy Meadow Beach. The story of Cheryl Grimmer is a reminder that no one truly vanishes. They live on in the memories of those who loved them and in the determination of those who refuse to let them be forgotten. Cheryl would have been nearly 60 years old today. She might have had children of her own or grandchildren. She might have been sitting on a beach somewhere, watching the waves, just like she was on that January afternoon. Instead, she is a symbol of the need for change, the power of family, and the fact that the truth doesn't have an expiration date. What are your theories? Do you think the LiDAR scans will finally find the evidence the police missed in the 70s? Or do you think the truth is buried deeper than any laser can see? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your theories often spark our next investigation. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the archives of Crime Cortex. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are following the March 2026 review closely, and the moment a breakthrough is announced, you'll hear it here first. Don't forget to like and share this video. Every share keeps the search for Cheryl alive.